So, as you mentioned, it's been 30 years since The Rack came out. How would you compare the death metal scene from those early years to the way the scene was circa 2007 when you guys got back together again to now, the present day?
That's sort of fun. Well, when
the reason why I ask is because, you know, when I first heard about Asphyx, it was at a time I got into this music in the mid 90s, and, you know, mid to late 90s, I think what people were more interested in was these very fast blast beat driven bands. And so, you know, the style of death metal that you guys were doing wasn't necessarily that popular, but it became popular again, maybe, you know, around the time you guys came back. So I'm just curious if like you felt that, if you felt that there was a movement towards this more old school style again.
Yeah, of course we felt that. Of course we did. And the thing is that the difference is that, yeah, like you say, you know, all of a sudden it was all about technical abilities, blind blast beats, and that was supposed to be like more extreme than the stuff we were doing back then. But in my opinion, it's not, you know. And I think death metal in the beginning, and also now, you know, it's really depending a lot on also, you know, like really kind of groovy parts, you know, that are catchy, that are easy to grab to the mind, you know. And that like I said, I mean, it may sound a bit silly, you know, that I get back into this rock and roll thing again. But when we started, with all the friends that we had, you know, from bands like Entomb to Ball Thrower to Benediction to Autopsy, you just name them, you know, from back in the days. They all had the same attitude, you know. When we were touring together, playing together, it was just one big bloody party going on, and that was like the main thing. And the good thing is, when we returned in 2007, that kind of style seemed a bit dead. Because, like you said, you know, people were listening to the death metal styles that were more and more developed throughout the years. But all of a sudden, people started to recognize that, okay, these are where death metal roots are from. So they started to listening back to even the youngsters, you know, to you know, the pioneers of the genre. And you can hear that because nowadays, and we're talking 2007, but now it's like, what, 13 years, 14 years later, and all of a sudden there's an enormous boom of old school kind of death metal that we, you know, played back in the late 90s, the late 80s and then the early 90s. And I think that's a fine development because the atmosphere is really similar to that kind of atmosphere that we had back then. I mean, when I see some youngster bands, you know, like, you know, Germans like Revella Flesh or something, you know, or Swedish, not least, well, a bit old already, but yeah, it's just all about good times. You know, we meet, whatever, you know, share backstage rooms, whatever. Hey, you know, your beers are ours or our beers are yours. It doesn't really matter. You just have a good time. You know, and that really pleases me a lot. You know, that stuff like that happens. It's still happening. It's really cool. So that's yeah, those are differences, but also like, yeah, comparisons. And it's for me, it's like really a positive development. Absolutely, I really enjoy myself now. You know, well, of course, now we deal with this bloody pandemic, but before that, you know, when you play in festivals or even, you know, like shows that you were headlining for yourself, there was always like nice support acts, so you will always catch up with, you know, a bunch of old friends or maybe even new friends, which is really cool. Absolutely. I think I speak for the whole band, really, when it comes to that.
And this boom of old school death metal and a lot of the newer bands that you mentioned, most of them will cite Asphyx as an influence. How does that make you feel?
Proud, of course, huh? Proud. I think if some other people, you know, like, well, Lemmy, you know, may rest in peace in the Afterlife bar, but or Kronos or whatever, you know, if I would mention that they are an influence to me, I think they're proud as well, you know, to be like that. Why not? It's really cool if people actually appreciate the work that you've done, and you should be proud of it. So I am, really. And if kids come up to me and say, oh, you're a really good influence, well, I go, nice, you know, fantastic, love it. You know, better than if, whatever, George Michael had an influence on them, you know.
So at the beginning of this year, Asphyx released their 10th album. I'm going to attempt to say the name. Tell me if I'm getting this right. Necrosaurus, is that right?
Perfect.
Excellent. Maybe explain to everyone what a Necrosaurus is.
Ah, shit, what was it again? Because I explained it so many times, but it's been a while now since I had to. Now, the thing is that, first of all, I just came with this album title, and I had no clue what to do with it. I just said to the guys, like, how about it? It's a word play, right? So we always used to have, since 2007, the word death in the album title. And I thought to myself, like, well, maybe we're going to change. So, of course, like, Necros is kind of universal, but it's Greek or ancient Greek. It's like, okay, you know, let's see, what can I do with it? What can I play with that word? And all of a sudden I go, okay, what if I take the eros from rhinoceros, so that massive animal combined with death, sounds fine. So the guy said to me, yeah, Martin, this is a cool one. So, okay, now I just got to figure out what the hell I'm going to do with it. And yeah, so then I built this fantasy story, science fiction, kind of like about this entity, enormous entity that travels through galaxies, universes, and consumes everything, where there's life involved, and then leaves just an empty void or vacuum or whatever. And that's the story of the creature, if you can call it a creature, because it's not mortal like we are, it cannot really die. So that's a bit what a Necrosaurus is like. It's a planet consumer, a universe destroyer, things like that. It's worse than COVID-19, that's for sure.
But was the concept influenced by the COVID pandemic at all?
No, not really. There is only. Yeah, well, I mean, yes, the recordings were a bit influenced by it because we had to keep distance, while we're jamming in the studio. But because most of the material was already done, and now, so I was like, okay, I'm not gonna, put all these ideas that were just developing in my mind, about it, like really now into the album. I had plenty of ideas. The only thing what we did do, was we put a bonus track on a double vinyl, which is called like Full Death Metal Scenario. That has like lyrics about the corona pandemic. So, but that's like I said, it turned out to be a bonus track. But when this whole pandemic started, everything, I said to the guys, like, Jesus Christ, this really is like a full death metal scenario. It would be silly not to write about, because we've been writing about these kind of things like all the time, since we started. So yeah, I had to write one song at least about it, but it didn't end up on the official, well, not the official, but on the regular release. Put it that way.
So tell me about the writing sessions for this album. What were your guys' intentions when you came into this album?
Well, to at least I come up with a similar quality that Incoming Death or Deathhammer has, because we knew the pressure was on. I mean, not that we were feeling that, but we knew that people were expecting things from us, because those albums, first of all, they did really well, and we still like them a lot, and we play a lot of them live. So that was the first thing, that either to equalize with this album or maybe even able to top it. But it took a while, because we were playing constantly live every time, and yeah, so it was not easy to come up with all kinds of ideas and with the riffs. So that came in slowly and slowly, and of course, a good quality riff doesn't come out like every hour of the day. But before the recordings, the actual recordings, we already did like a kind of a studio jam session with 5 or 6 tracks, and then after hearing them, we realized like, well, there needs to be some arranging. Like extra arranged, there needs to be something done more. They're not strong enough. So much of the stuff, 5 or 6 songs, the core of them were already done and finished when we really hit like hit the studio for the final sessions, and then we just had enough, and it came out really fast. It took us 2 weekends, I think, of jam, and then all the drum tracks were recorded, and that's where you have the foundation of the album. So all we needed to do afterwards was then the right lyrics and vocal parts and the guitars. So that's a bit of the whole recording story.
Well, tell me about the actual recording. Who did you end up recording this album with?
We always record with Tom Meyer at his self-named studio, Tom Meyer Studio. It's close by here. I'm here in 10 minutes, by public traffic, and we feel well there. It's it's like a practice room as well, So when Tom knows, okay, Asphyx is coming, he goes, okay, guys, here is all the stuff. I go back home, because it's in the garden of his house, basically, the whole studio, the building. So he goes back home, and he says, okay, if you want to record something, just let me know. You just send me a message or in WhatsApp or something, and then I'll come over and record it. And then afterwards, he goes, I can't believe the mess that you guys always make. And then it turns out an album that's just fantastic. He says, like, I see the whole procedure. It's just fantastic. And he's really, we feel well with him, He's relaxed. He's a professional. He's young. So that gives I say that kind of an extra impulse as well, that you not have to deal with the old professional, in between fingers guys or something. He has this kind of fresh input too. So that's where we record. Of course, Tom is not in the end. He's not like he's a recording engineer, but he's not the one that mixes the album in the end. That was Sebastian Leverman. So that's a whole different procedure, a whole different process.
So tell me about Sebastian, and tell me what he brought to your sound.
Well, first of all, it was a risk, kind of tricky step for us to take. We decided maybe to change some things sound-wise, that to not work with Dan Swano on this album, which is the one who mixed all the albums before, you know. And it's not because we were not satisfied with Dan, on the contrary, because he's not only, you know, a very professional and good mixer, but he's also a good friend of the band and a metalhead. But we thought maybe like a fresh input, you know, from somebody else. So what we did was we knew a couple of people, and we sent a rough recording. I think it was from Mount Skull, yeah, because that song contains, you know, all the elements. It starts like a doom song, then you got the fast death metal pace in the mid part, comes back to doom again. So okay, let's see who comes up with the best premix. And so we had a couple of things back, and it's not that the other ones were not satisfactory. They're all good in a way, but yeah, Sebastian was the one that really stand out of the rest. And so we decided to do it with him. And I think what's really good is that he's not like what you expect us to take, because he comes from the power metal scene. You know, he's in a band called Odd Nogan himself, and so people would think, what the hell is a death metal band doing with these power metal dudes, you know? But he also said, because we knew him, yeah, because he was an old friend of Husky's, and he always said to Husky, like, yeah, it would be one of my you know, dreams come true in life if I could just have the opportunity to mix a band like Asphyx or a similar kind of old school death metal band, because he doesn't listen to a lot of death metal, but that's the kind of style that he does like, you know. So for him, yeah, it was like a wish come true, and so he put all his efforts into the mixing, and you can actually tell, you can hear that. And what I like about it is that I think he put this kind of bombasm that you can hear in power metal guitars a bit into our mix, and that's the biggest change, I think, from the other albums. But it sounds way more massive, in my opinion. Really, I mean, the guitar and bass sound on this album are just incredible. I go like, well, this is probably the heaviest shit I ever featured on when it comes to the sound of all the guitars, the instruments, you know. So I think that's really like all those credits come to Sape, and of course also the guitar boys, you know. So yeah, he did a fantastic job, and the guys as well, they were really, really happy with him. They're really satisfied in a way of the communication went well. He was really enthusiastic. They could come with all kinds of ideas and put everything into it what they had. So it was very, very satisfactory for both parties. Absolutely. And I think you can hear that.
Yeah, the guitar tone especially sounds really great on this album. He did a really good job.
Yeah, thank you very much. You'll be chuffed with that. Yeah. Yeah, he did. I agree. I mean, sometimes because was a nice gesture of Paul came with that idea. He said to me, Martin, you know, because I can practice my voice at home. So he goes, hey Martin, you know what? I asked Sape to make a mixed version, but then leave your vocals out, because maybe it will be easier for you to practice on that at home, you know, so you don't have your own vocals to listen to again. So cool, nice gesture. But there, without my vocals, of course, I can hear exactly what the guitar players are really doing, you know. And I said to Paul afterwards, oh, fucking hell, this is just it's just a mind shredder, you know, incredible. It's really fantastic. Sometimes I just put the instrumental version of the album because I don't want to hear, you know, myself.